question we came to is, are we coming to the end of an era? And we come to ends. We've done what was we refer to as era work in the past, not extensively, but it was introduced to us many years ago. And in our realization, Stephanie's realization actually, was that are we coming to an end of an era? And I think the absolute answer to that is we are coming to the end of an era. And we come to the end of eras in all sorts of places in our life as we enter and transition from one age category to the next age category, our 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s, etc. We are actually leaving one era and entering a new era. So an era is coming to an end, and that can be with jobs, by the way. It can, whatever career you might have, perhaps your business is coming to the end of an era. So these are all the conversation. And in Stephanie's case, and I don't want to speak for you, you can maybe talk about the experience you had with your father, who is at 94 plus years old. And really that is coming to the end of an era, given what's going on for him. So you had that experience, and that was kind of what brought it up. Why don't you share a little bit of that, and then people would relate to it, I think.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think to acknowledge Carrie Granger and Alan Kahn for the conversation and the wording and the frame of looking at stages of life as eras. To me, it makes it feel a little bit more, I don't know, emotional, or a little bit more practical when I'm looking at change or things coming to an end. Because when something comes to an end, there's also a new beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And the old cliche is when one door closes, the other door opens. But for me, this last couple of weeks, spending some time with my 94-year-old father, really got me grounded, because I had to be completely present. He's going through an early onset dementia. It seems to be getting worse. So the father that I knew and grew up with is really changing right in front of my eyes. And to be with my brother in the apartment, in the family home, and being able to take care of him, I realized that as life stages change and shift, not just going from knowing my father as a vibrant man 2 months ago to not being, barely remembering, things, and not being able to speak very well. The era that's coming to a close is in family, so familial. So it gave me time to pause, and it gave me time to recognize and reflect and really go back and look at the stages and the eras that I went through with my family, and with my birth family, um, and my dad in particular. I got a chance to really close my relationship with my mom when she was sick in the hospital. She took about 8 days in the hospital. I spent 6 of those sneaking into the hospital, which I've been slapped. My hand's been slapped for that by certain family members. But I was not going to let her die alone, because the end of that particular era gave me permission to really look at my life as who I've become because of her. And I'm doing the same with my dad right now. So as it comes to an era, and as this era comes to an end, I want to have all the emotions. I want to have all the experiences. I want to have as many memories as I can, and to really acknowledge, so that when this comes to a close, and I'm going to be an orphan, hopefully not anytime soon, but looking at it as in a way of, with a lot of grace and a lot of gratitude.
Well, the thing about eras, and as we kind of talk through this, I realize that there's an end to an era that we may choose. So the transition is it's celebratory, isn't it? I'll leave the example of empty nesters, parents, their kids are moving on to college, or they're moving out away from home, or perhaps they're moving away from the city, going to another country, to another city, whatever that might be. It's the end of an era. And, that's a transition that is often celebrated. It leaves, a big gap for many parents, but ultimately it's the end of an era. And if you do that gracefully, if you do it intentionally, if you do it with celebration, which we just did a podcast on celebration, that would be an example of celebration. And if you're doing it intentionally from a mindset point of view, that is really owning it and celebrating that era and consciously bringing it to an end. Now, I'm going to go off on a little bit. So, just a thought that I had: when when the end of an era is being forced upon us. Okay, now we know that your dad or my mom, we're both got parents 95 years old. I mean, that is going to be coming to the end of an era. what you're doing is, and we can't control that, right? There's no control. That's life. That is the cycle of life, if you will. And ultimately, you don't have control of that. What you do have control over, however, in which you're embracing, and you did that with your mom, is to actually honor that shift, the end of an era of being the well, you'll always be the child of your parents, but having that relationship with your parents in the physical world, right? And I think that that's an important understanding to have and to take. I go back to a couple of years ago. Our one of our businesses been around 38 years. We were forced to close one of our locations, and it happened to be on the south side of Edmonton. It was one of the original locations. It was the original location, actually, was south side, and it was really the end of an era for that business, that part of the business. But we weren't able to honor. We were forced to. We didn't. We had really no choice but to shut the business down. It was the responsible business decision to make. But here's what as we got through this, is I went, I really didn't honor the end of that era, and I was pissed off. Like, I was really pissed at what the government was doing, the overreaction to all of what was happening within the pandemic and the decisions that they were making. And I was at the effect of their decisions. And it really pissed me off. The other way I could have looked at that now in hindsight is going, something, I can't control it. I have to make the decisions I have to make. And I need to honor the end of an era of that community-based store that was very familiar within that world of skating in this case. And I think, again, in hindsight, it would have served us better if we would have just honored the end of that era. So long-winded, but that's my thought.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I really miss that store, and I think about the people that were so upset, when there was such an overreaction, and there's still people skating, and there's still people outside, and there were things that we couldn't control that were being forced upon us. Got it. But then I looked at the responses of the clients and how frustrated our clients got, and they didn't want to drive to the West End, and they were going to find a new store, but the ripple effect of those things. So you're right. I mean, had we celebrated, maybe had a blowout sale or a celebration of some sort, we could have shared in that. And lessons learned. And I think that's something that I'm really seeing now.